final proper preseason game, really, before Leeds next week. And you know what? Was we great today? No. But I think there's a lot to take out of that positively. Also, we stuck with the 4, which I think basically confirms we're going to play that against Leeds. Cody was dropped for Collins. Again, I think that basically confirms what happened against Leeds. But I think the best thing about that game was we weren't actually that good, which I know sounds stupid, but against Besiktas and against Alaves in those 2 preseason games, everything went in, every pass was working, they were terrible. It just felt a bit too easy. There was no challenge, and my only concern was if we played against a better side who are going to have more of the ball, or maybe even sit back against us a little bit, would the back 4 be able to handle it? Because whether you like the back 5 or not, which by the way, I would have had no issue with us playing a back 5 this season, the one thing about the back 5, it gives you a defensive base, it gives you solidity. Even when we were crap last season, you never really felt like we were going to concede a lot of the time, or at least I didn't anyway. Whereas, obviously opposite, you never felt like we were going to score, but you never felt like we were going to concede. Whereas with this back 4, my only concern was if we played against a better side and things weren't really going well and every pass wasn't working and Neto and Penence weren't banging everything in, would we have anything to fall back on, if that makes sense? Whereas this game, I don't think we were particularly great. I think they did test us at certain points, but I never felt like we were going to concede. But crucially, every time we went forward and Matinho and Neves got the ball and it went into the front 3, I always felt like we were going to score. The balance was better. Was we great? No, but we had a good threat going forward and we had a good defensive base. So for me, that gives me... Because look, Premier League games aren't as open as those games against Besiktas and Alaves. A lot of them will be like that game against Sporting. And obviously, they were playing a back 5 as well, which probably didn't really help. But I think that game will look more like Wolves Premier League games next season. Will we smash in 4 every week? No. But at least we will probably carry some sort of attacking threat. Also, I think the 2 big positives were probably Nate Nuri and the front 3. You know, everyone's been in crisis about the Raul Jimenez injury, and I can understand why, but I don't really think the Raul Jimenez injury actually affects us on the pitch that much. I think it just more exposes how badly the recruitment's been. But just because the recruitment's been bad doesn't mean we won't be able to beat. As I get a phone call, just because of the Jimenez injury doesn't mean we won't be able to have a coherent attack, if that makes sense. You know, ultimately our first 2 games are against Leeds and Fulham, who none of them have good defences. I think even without Raul Jimenez, I thought Daniel Pence was really good today, by the way. I think even without Raul Jimenez, we'll be able to be competitive in those 2 games. Also, we'll have less of a bench option. Probably won't be able to play the 4-2-3-1 or whatever. But I think it's shown that obviously the recruitment's terrible right now, but we can still be competitive in those first 3, 4, 5 games without Raul Jimenez. And I think that's a really big positive. The back 4 looked settled. Jose Sarr came back and didn't really look injured or didn't look fatigued. He looked fine. I know Collins gave away the penalty, but I thought he had a really good game alongside Kilman. Johnny's solid as usual. I'm glad I backed Nate Nuri a lot. Like, I defended Nate Nuri a lot in his first season. I thought the potential was always there. Neves had a good game. Even Dendoncker, you know, I've given Dendoncker a lot of flack, but I think he's had a really good pre-season. Obviously, we still need a central midfielder to play that Dendoncker role as the third man in that midfield, but I think he's done fine. You know, I'm not a big fan of Dendoncker, but ultimately he's a very solid squad player, and you need to keep those sort of guys. Just because a player's not good enough to start every week doesn't mean you should sell them. They can be an alright squad player. I think Morgan's kind of held down that right wing spot, and I thought Potenza and Neto were pretty solid. And even when Hwang came on, look, Hwang's not great, but Hwang's earned a shot. You know, he's here permanently now. We have to back him. And I thought he made a couple of good runs, and Hwang's not a terrible player. And in an open system, you'd assume he'd do a bit better. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a good performance considering the circumstances. And I think that Wolves performance is more of what we'll look like next season. Not like we were against Alaves and Besiktas. That was way too easy. Maybe we'll do that in the cup, or you know, maybe like the Watford game last season. But 90% of Wolves games will probably be like that game against Sporting. But at least we still have the defensive base we had last season, the season before. But ultimately, there feels like a bit more. Every time we go forward, it feels like we're going to score. And for me, that's positive. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and yeah, peace.